So if you are to say or to proclaim, I am a student of the Lord Buddha's philosophy, I am his student, I am his disciple, if you do not have an understanding, a proper understanding of Anicca, Dukkha and Anatta, then you have no right to claim that you are a student of his. So is it not worth spending a little time to understand what Anicca, Dukkha and Anatta are? Let's try and do that. What is Anicca? Have you heard of that word before? Anicca? Not as you wish. The beauty of these words in the Magadhi language, the Magadhi language or Pali is what the Lord Buddha used to teach the Dhamma, is that the meaning of the words are contained within them. There's a science called etymology. Look it up in the dictionary. Etymology is how words are made up. And the same applies when we study these words in Pali as well. Anicca, Icca, Na Icca or Anicca, Anicca. What is Icca? Have you heard? Now this is where I'm going to have to refer to some Sinhala terms, but I'll give the translations in English as well. Have you heard of the word Icca Bhanga? Icca Bhanga. Have you heard that word? What is Icca Bhanga in English? Disappointment? Bhanga is to be destroyed. So Icca Bhanga is where your hope is lost. You have lost hope. You are disappointed. So Icca is your wish, is what you wish for, what you hope for. Na Icca is Nyaya or theory or the principle. So what is Na Icca? Anicca. Something that is against the theory or the principle of what you wish it to be. In simple terms, things are not the way you want it to be or you wish it to be. Now that's simple to try and put it that way, but that doesn't say a lot. Let's try and explain that so it makes sense. Think about I'm trying to think of an example that might apply for all of you. Okay, let's take this. Let's take fire. We've all seen fire. You've lit a fire. Very simple example. But simple is always good. As long as it works, right? If you take a matchstick, rub it against the side of the matchbox where you get the friction. So now you have material that ignites or that burns. That is the gunpowder. Is it gunpowder? Some kind of powder on the end of the matchstick. You're giving it friction, and through that you give it heat, and you have oxygen in the air. When the three of them combine, what's the result? Fire. How much did what you wished or what you wanted have an influence on that? If I asked you to write an equation, x plus y plus z equals fire, what would you put into x plus y plus z? What would be the values against x, y and z? So x would be the powder, the gunpowder or whatever that might be. Y being friction and therefore the heat that you get, and Z being oxygen in the air. Now if I said, okay, hang on a second, I want to add something else to that equation, and that is my desire for the result to be fire, do you think I'm doing anything worthwhile by adding that? Is it not the same as adding a 0 to that equation? Because as long as you have those three conditions, your result is a fire. Whether you wish it to be or whether you like it to be fire or not has nothing to do with it. Another example. Think about your... Actually, this is a good one, especially if you have children. And if you are a child, then think about your own experiences. Your child's performance at school. Right? Think about their last school tests and the result that they got at the school test. If they had to do X amount of study, or so much study, go to so many classes, do so much practice, homework, tuition, to achieve a certain result, and all of these were applied in the right amounts, and the result was a pass, what if that subject was the child's favorite subject, but you would never want them to progress their career in that? Let's say something like, I don't know, when I was growing up, the last thing my parents wanted me to do was something like music or dance. I mean, times might have changed now, but back then they wanted me to be a doctor or a mathematician or an engineer, right? So if I said I was interested in music, I mean, I could study it at school, but to take it any further beyond GCSEs was a no-go. Right? So, but say for the child that was their favorite subject. Let's say dance. For a child, dance is their favorite subject at school. So they put in so much study, they do all the homework that they're asked for, they go to all the classes, take tuition. I don't know if there is tuition for dance, maybe not. But you put all of those factors into an equation, and the end result being an A pass for that exam. It was the child's wish that they got the A pass, but it was the parents' wish that they didn't, because they didn't want the child to progress in that career. They wanted them to progress in math or science. Now, did the parents' wish have any effect on that result? What about the child's wish? Because one could say, well, okay, it's a child that's actually doing all of those things. If the child didn't want that result, then, clearly they could have not gotten it. They could have not done something. Well, if say for example, at the class test, instead of writing the right answers, they've now written all the wrong answers. Clearly they could do that, right? If they didn't want to pass the test, they could just write a lot of rubbish in their paper and then tell their parents, actually, I wrote all the right answers, I don't know what happened. But is it their wish that had anything to do with it, or is it the fact that one of the conditions for them to have passed the test was all of the right answers to be in the right places, and that condition was not fulfilled? See, the Lord Buddha teaches us cause and effect, hetupalavada. He doesn't, when asked the question, "O Lord Buddha, do you teach of existence or non-existence?" The Lord Buddha says, "I don't teach of existence, atta, or non-existence, natta. I teach about hetupalavada, or cause and effect." If the causes are there, the effect arises. That's all there is. Provided the right causes are there, it will rain today. Provided the right causes are there, it will not rain today. Whether you wish for it to rain or whether I wish for it not to rain has nothing to do with it. But what's the problem then? The problem is that when we go through in life, we attach ourselves to these results. We attach ourselves to the phenomenon that is the result of these conditions. For example, I might attach myself to the result that I get, that my child gets I expect my child to get a certain result in their exam. I mean, let's be fair, parents, that's what we do. You want your children to do the best they can, and you then set expectations. See, when I talk to young children, I tell them, there's nothing wrong with setting expectations, just make sure you get an insurance policy. What do I mean by that? What's the first thing you do before you put a car out on the road? You get an insurance policy. Why? Because if something happens to and you have no guarantee that nothing's going to happen to the car, that the car's not have an accident, therefore you get an insurance policy. What guarantee do you have that if you set an expectation on something, that expectation is going to be realized? Because if you can do that, that's not an expectation, that's a certainty. If you set an expectation, get an insurance policy. Because if you're setting an expectation, be ready to be disappointed. If you're not ready to be disappointed, don't set expectations. This is how we bring suffering towards us. Things around us happen due to cause and effect. What do? We go and set expectations. This fan, or that fan up there, is turning because there are 101 different conditions that have lined up in the correct shape and form for that fan to be rotating at the speed it is. What are some of those? What might be some of those conditions? There's water that's falling from a waterfall somewhere, that's hitting a turbine, right? That turbine's got, say, 10 blades. This water's falling at a certain speed. What if the water hits something on the way down? That speed is now reduced. Okay, what if one of those blades on the turbine falls off? Or what if there's an issue in one of the electrical circuits? Now that turbine then generates power. It comes through the electric wires. How many kilometers of electric wire do you think it passes on the way here? All the way from wherever it's generated, all the way up to here, right, through the electric circuitry in this building and up there, and it's turning now. You couldn't begin to list the different conditions that need to be lined up for this result to be realized the way it is right now. It would just be too numerous. You could start writing just the right causes for a certain effect, and you'd never end. When we were in Australia, we did an experiment with the children there. I asked them to think of a random number. I said, think of a random number. And I think one boy there said, I think it was a girl actually, she said, was it number 9 or something like that? I said, so okay, so it's number 9, right? She said, yeah, you're not going to change it. No, it's number 9, okay. So did anyone influence that? I said, don't tell the other person sat next to you what that number is. Just think of the random number and then say it. So it was not influenced by anyone, and they said, right, number 9. I can't remember exactly what number it was, but let's just say it's number 9. And then I asked them, okay, so now you're saying this has not been influenced. I asked her, why did you go for number 9? And then she said, it's because that was my last birthday. So I said, I thought I asked you for a random number. How can this be random now? Because it has been influenced by something else. So just because your last birthday was 9, now it's number 9, okay. So why was 9 your last birthday? It's because that was when, 9 years ago was when your parents decided to have you. Either by choice or, I don't know, out of no choice. However, that's when you were conceived, and 9 years later, here you are. So what about the conditions 9 years ago that determined that you were to be conceived? Perhaps, it had been a year after their parents had got married. Why did the parents wait a year after they got married? Maybe because they had to wait until they could save up to buy a house, so they could settle down before they wanted to have a child. Why did they have to wait a year for that? Well, because, when, the job that the father did, or perhaps the mother was unemployed and just the father worked and on his salary, or his income, or their joint income, whatever, it took them a year to save up for that. And why was that? Well, maybe it's because, when he was studying music at school, his parents said, don't study music, go to study science. Whereas actually, had he gone on to study music, he would have been much more well off. But no, he had to go study science because his parents wanted him to do that. And therefore, it took him that long to save up, to buy a house, to have a child, so that 9 years later, she's now sat in front of me telling me that her random number is number 9. Is it really random? So this was the second time I did this experiment. The previous time, I asked another girl what her random number was, and we went all the way back. I think so we went through various points in her life, how she was left or right-handed, to the way that her cot was laid down at home, to the way that the architect had designed the house. And you might think, what's the relevance? Well, actually, if you keep asking the question why, or how did that happen to be, how did that happen to be, how did that happen to be, there's no end to it. If you were to list or write down all the different conditions that gave a particular result, believe you me, there would be no end to it. This is why there's a problem with us going and attaching ourselves to a certain result. When you go and hook yourself to a certain result and you say, I want this to be the outcome, you're doing that with no full understanding of all the conditions that need to line up to give you that result. So what happens if one of those conditions change? You're not going to get the result you wanted. What happens then? You're disappointed. So when you set these expectations, aren't you clearly setting yourself up for disappointment? This is what the Lord Buddha says, Anicca. Na icca. Things around you doesn't happen because you want them to happen like that. It's because the right conditions are lined up for that to be the result. It's nothing to do with your wish. It's nothing to do with your desire. It's nothing to do with how you want it to be. If the right conditions are there, or forget the word right, if the conditions are there, the result is there. That is hetu palavade. If the right hetu or the causes are there, you get that effect. Palaya, or the fruit. So when you understand this philosophy, do you then go about setting expectations on your houses, your jobs, your education? I mean, that's not to say you don't work as hard as you can. You do work as hard as you can. You do try and maintain your homes. You try and, do the best you can at school. You try and, do all your work on time. You try and manage your time. But you try and do them without setting those expectations. Why? Because there's a danger with setting expectations. The moment you set an expectation, you are setting yourself up for disappointment. And it's this mental disappointment that is the killer. So the Buddha goes on to say, if something is anicca, or not the way you want it to be, the result is what? Dukkha. Anicca dukkha. He talks about 3 kinds of dukkha. Dukkha dukkha, viparinama dukkha, and sankhara dukkha. Remember when we started... Remember when we started, I asked you, why do we eat? And it's to satisfy hunger. Why do we look for shelter? Is to protect ourselves from the elements. Why do we drink? It's because we are thirsty. So clearly there's always, with this existence that is a human being, the human body that we have come to possess, we are constantly struggling for its sustenance. We're constantly having to do things for its maintenance. Feed it, clothe it, provide shelter, work, even things like, okay, think about this. If you are married, or if you're in a relationship, why did you get married? Why did you get into a relationship? I mean, I've had this conversation with my wife, or my wife when I had one. Not that I'm divorced, but obviously I don't have one anymore. Okay? What was I looking for in a relationship? When I had lived about 20 odd years of my life, and then asked myself, what else am I missing? My parents helped me as well, and they said, well, soon enough you're going to be all by yourself. You're not going to have anyone to talk to. I never stopped to think, hang on a second. Isn't the problem here that I need someone to talk to? That there's this craving, that there's this dissatisfaction within me, that I'm always looking for someone to engage with? Isn't that the problem? Isn't it the problem that having been born a human being, I need someone to keep me entertained? Why do you get a pet? Is it because you are so compassionate that you want to, you bring a stray animal and feed it? Is it purely out of compassion? Or is it because you need that little bit more, you need a little bit of entertainment, you need that engagement, you need something to keep you occupied? Isn't your mind always looking for something to do, to be engaged with? Could you just sit down for 1 second, or not, well actually, 1 second you'd probably manage that. Could you sit down in a dark room, lock yourself up, no light, nothing, no sound, and be like that? How long can you stay like that for? How long? How long do you think? An hour? You shouldn't do anything. You shouldn't even shake your arms or legs. I mean, seriously, why do people when they sit, why do they start shaking their legs? What does it give them when they do that? What are they looking for? Is that for exercise? Why do people bite their nails? Like sometimes when you on your palms or on some part of your body, you get these like a mole or something, like a wart, and you feel it protrudes from the surface. Imagine you had something like that on the wrist of your palm. From the moment you get that, without you even thinking about it, your other hand is always like itching at it or scratching at it. It happens without you even thinking about it. What are you looking for? Why are you doing that? Why can't you just do nothing? Have you ever stopped to think about this? When we think of Rahatan Vahanse, you think about someone, the picture that comes in your mind is someone that walks, looking down, no interest in looking any further than, 2 or 3 yards ahead of them. And that's great. Why can't you and I do like that? Why are we always looking around? When you're driving, when you're driving in a car, clearly you've got to look around. But why, if you're being driven in a car, if you're a passenger in a car, why do you have to keep looking around? What purpose does that serve? Are you providing directions to the driver? No, but you always want to know what's going on. This is a human condition. There's a human condition that drives the fact that we're always we need to know. We're so curious. We need to find out what's going on. We need the world to engage with us. And we need to engage with the world. Why do we play computer games? Why do we do, quite literally most things, other than eating, sleeping and drinking and, taking medicines when we need it? I mean, that's what a Rahatan Vahanse does. Unless someone invites them to come and teach some Dhamma, what does a Rahatan Vahanse do? Have you heard of Nirodha Samapatti? It's where they go into this deep state of mental samadhi and they stop the arising of thoughts. Thoughts do not arise while you are in a state of mental, that state of mental samadhi called Nirodha Samapatti. But anyone that is not a Rahatan Vahanse is looking for two things, always. Vedana and Sanya. Loosely translated to English as feeling and perception. You want to know something is going on and then you want to identify it. You need to know something's going on. That's why you're always looking around. And then you need to try and put labels against it. This is what's going on. I'm not satisfied with knowing something's going on. I need to know what's going on as well. That's why you look around. That's why that's why you need to shake your legs when you're sat down. Have you ever wondered why do you do that? Because your mind is, if your mind is not being engaged, it's looking for, if I'm not getting it from the outside world, I'm going to generate it myself. Let's start shaking those legs a little bit. Now I can feel something's going on. So isn't the problem that we're suffering from this human condition that we don't see? And the question I ask is, why do you get married? And said, and as I said, I had this conversation with my wife. I got married because my mind was looking for something to engage with. My mind was looking for something to engage with. Her mind was looking for something to engage with. All we did was give each other two minds to engage with. Something to keep each other occupied. It ashames me to look in her face and say, the only reason I got married to you was because I needed someone to keep me occupied. When actually she thought I loved her. And that's what I've been telling her, I really love you, I'll do anything and everything for you. Well, actually all I was looking for was for my mind to be occupied with something. Because otherwise, if I could just sit down in a dark room, do nothing, I wouldn't need anything or anyone else to come and engage me. But I can't. Because my mind's always looking for something new, something different. It gets bored and it gets tired of the same thing. Given over and over and over again, I need something else now. There's loads of teledramas in Sri Lanka, right? I mean, in the UK there are one or two popular ones like EastEnders and Emmerdale, I think is another one. But I know in Sri Lanka, so we watch sometimes on YouTube, and usually we are spoiled for choice, because every week there's like a new one. Question for you is, how many times can you watch the same episode of the same teledrama? How many times? Once. Why can you not watch it a second time? Is it not because you now know what's going to happen? your mind does not seek. Your mind's still looking for something new, something interesting, but it's not going to get it now because it knows what's going to happen. This is why you now need a new episode. Because if all you needed was some pictures, some music, well, you can get that from the same episode. But your mind needs to be entertained. And for the mind to be entertained, you need to give it new sensations and new feelings. You need to give it something new to identify. Something new to keep it occupied. So isn't that the problem we need to try and solve? The fact that it needs it. But that's not what we've been trying to solve all this time. Throughout our lives, whenever we wanted something, we thought the answer to this is to go and find it outside. When we wanted food, when we were hungry, we went and got food. When we wanted shelter, we went and got shelter. When we wanted entertainment, we went and watched a movie. Went out with friends. Went out for a meal. Went and had a chat. But every time we needed it, what did we do? You just put a plaster on it. You never went and actually solved the underlying problem, which is, I'm still looking for it. I'm still yearning it. I still need it. That is what Buddhism tries to cure. The root cause. So all of the other things you can keep doing, and you'll keep doing forever and ever and ever. How many movies have you watched now? How many teledramas have you watched? Are you now satisfied? You'll still go home and watch another one tonight, and tomorrow, and the day after. Think about a friend. How many days in a row will you keep calling them and just have a chat with them before they tell you, yeah, okay, I'll call you in another week or so, right? I mean, don't ring me tomorrow. You've already rung me like 3 times now already. Because they get bored. Same voice, you're talking about the same things. No, why? Because their mind is now looking for something new, something different. And so is yours. Venasak, always looking for something different. Why are we looking for something different? That's what keeps our mind going. And that's where the Lord Buddha gives a cure for. That process of looking for something new, something interesting, something exciting. Because unless you treat that, we are going to go through in samsara always looking for something. Always looking for happiness, always looking for something to engage with. But we never ultimately find it. That's the problem. As human beings, we've been looking at it for throughout many births. As devas, we've been looking at it for over many births. As brahmas, in the apayas. In fact, the things that we did to find that interest, that satisfaction, the things that we did, the akusalas that we did, took us into the hells, and we've suffered plenty for it. And yet today we are still looking for it. So this is why the Lord Buddha says, once you realize that everything around you is anicca, is cause and effect, and therefore dukkha is cause and effect. It's not how you want it to be. All you see around you is just, things just happen because the right causes line up to give that effect. And then if you go and hook yourself on it, the end result is disappointment, and therefore dukkha, suffering. But going through that process is anatta, not anatma. Anatta. One interpretation today to the word anatta is soullessness. That's what I learned at Dhampasal. I went to an English Dhampasal in Sri Lanka. I went to a Sinhala one and then to an English one as well. And the word anatta was taught to me as soullessness. When actually someone goes to the Lord Buddha and asks, "Oh Lord Buddha, do you preach about a soul or do you not preach about a soul?" And he says, "I preach of neither. I don't say there is a soul, I don't say there is no soul either." But then today the translation we give to Anatta is Anatma, soullessness. When clearly he said, "I don't talk about a no soul." What he does say is Anatta though. Na Atta, useless. Atta is Artha. Na Artha, Arthayak na. Useless, essenceless, meaningless. Well, clearly it's meaningless, because if everything around you, everything that you can perceive is cause and effect, everything you see around you has been conditioned by causes, and then you go and attach yourself to that with expectation, and all you get out of that is disappointment, what's the point of doing that? Stop doing it. This is why he says that process is simply useless. Give it up. See, this is the meaning of Anicca, Dukkha and Anatta that the Lord Buddha teaches, that you don't get from any other religion. Because all other religions talk about, do ping or do merits, acquire merits that will take you to heavens, where actually the Lord Buddha says there's nothing wrong with going to heavens, but even time there is limited. What happens when that time runs out? Going into heavens is like putting money into a bank account. You can keep withdrawing until when? Until it comes back with a zero balance. You check your balance in the ATM and it goes zero. You can't withdraw any money after that. Then it's time for you to come back down. And the problem is this as well. Living as human beings, there are plenty of opportunities to acquire merits, right? You can give dane to Hamudru, to the temple, right? You can help the poor people. You can teach someone. There's lots of opportunities. What about in the Deva worlds? Do you think you can go and help people, the Devas? Do you think they need anything from you? They've got everything they need. Whether it's food or, the ways to travel places, they don't travel like you and I. They wish they want to be somewhere, then the next moment they're there. That's how they travel. So, not unlike you and me, they don't need money in those places. They don't need food or shelter like you and I do. They get all of that through the merits that they've acquired. So, when you're in the Deva world, you don't have the opportunity like you do now to acquire those merits. So you are no longer depositing money into that bank account. So as soon as that currency runs out, that money runs out, you're back into the human worlds, or even worse, into the apayas. In other deshanas we've talked about apayas. I encourage you to try and listen to some of them as well. And as adults, even if you haven't watched some of the videos, on YouTube, just type in hell and watch some of these, because these descriptions of apayas and the way those videos have been animated are texts that have been taken from the Tripitaka. So if you believe in the text in the Tripitaka, then think twice before you reject and say, no, that can't be true. Do you have any questions from what we've talked about so far? Okay. What I wanted to do today was really to get an introduction, to take a first step to our discussion. You see, don't forget that you are very, very, very and extremely fortunate. Why do I say this? Most of you here understand Sinhala as well. Some of you don't, but that's okay. But most of you do. I think most of you have been born to Buddhist families, so you have a Buddhist background. Because chances are, if you weren't, you wouldn't be encouraged, or you wouldn't have you clearly wouldn't be encouraged to come and listen to some of these deshana and to listen to Shastra Mahanse's deshana. Your senses are in perfect working order. What if your ears didn't work? What if you were deaf? You wouldn't be able to listen to any of this? In one of the previous deshana, and I think it's probably it was uploaded to Skype, so if you can get a copy of that and listen to it. We talk about how difficult the Shastra Muhanse says it is to be born a human being. He gives a metaphor, and he tries to explain the probability of someone being born a human being after they have died. And if you can try and listen to that, and you might have even heard it in one of the sing. Have you heard of that? Do you need Shastra Muhanse to become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer? Do you need his teaching for that? But you do need his teaching if you want to attain Nibbana. What guarantee do you have that the next time you come back into the human world, if you do, that we are going to have Shastra Muhanse's Dhamma? What guarantee do you have? See, now is the time for those that are lucky enough, and you are, to get this done. Listen to this Dhamma, take it on board, practice it and attain Nibbana. Practice this life. I'm not saying become a monk or a nun. What I am saying though is, put these teachings into your lives. Practice it. If you're a Buddhist, don't ever, when someone asks you, how is your teacher's teaching any different to any others, just say, oh, I don't know. Sounds like they're all the same to me. Don't do injustice to your Shastra Muhanse like that. No, this is the perfect one. He didn't spend 6 years undergoing extreme asceticism for nothing. He did that for you and me. He didn't give up his family. He was destined to be an emperor. He didn't give up all of that for you and I to just be ungrateful for that and just say, oh yeah, well, I was born a Buddhist, I'll live a Buddhist, I'll die a Buddhist, so what, I don't know, I've never gained anything out of it. Take some time to understand this teaching of the Lord Buddha. Take some time to understand the real meaning behind the teaching. Because it's only through that you can seek that liberation that you've been looking for. This is why I said at the start, right? From what I can see, you're all very successful people. So, you clearly have successful lives. Whether that's work, study, family lives. But have you found that happiness you've been looking for? If you are still looking for that answer to fill that box with, that has a label called happiness next to it, take some time to study what the Lord Buddha teaches. Take some time to study Anicca, Dukkha and Anatta. And then you will realize whether an answer to that really exists or whether it's all but a delusion. And whether that happiness is outside or whether that happiness is something you find when you stop looking for it outside.